Well, welcome everybody to Downtown Harbor Church. If it is your first time here, my name is John. I am the lead pastor. Appreciate you guys coming on out and checking us out. So today we are kicking off a new series. We're calling it Sunday Scaries. It's going to be a two-parter this week, next week, and then if you've been here before, you know that we take off for Labor Day weekend, so that's 3 weeks away. Now, when it comes to the Sunday Scaries, I'm going to guess that a lot of you, okay, particularly if you're under the age of, let's call it 45, know exactly what I mean when I talk about the Sunday Scaries. The rest of you might not be familiar with this term. However, once I define it for you, chances are you're going to be like, oh yeah, I got that. So what are the Sunday Scaries? Well, the definitions are kind of varied when it comes to this condition, but here's the working definition that I came up with. It is the dread one feels as the weekend comes to a close, mixed with the anxiety of work on Monday, okay? So this is my working definition. But the truth is, it is a phenomenon that is hard to define, but you know it when you have it. And generally, the Sunday Scaries sort of descend upon you like a dark cloud around 4 p.m. today. You know what I'm talking about? And like you're having a great day, everything's going really well, and then all of a sudden, you have like an existential crisis, okay? So that's the Sunday Scaries. Now, in the last 10 years, there has been a surprisingly amount of research done on this new phenomenon. I want to show you just some of the findings that these researchers have found. First, they concluded that almost 66% of Americans suffer from the Sunday Scaries. You dig deeper into these findings, you'll learn that 75% of American workers suffer from the Sunday Scaries, which often leads people to conclude that the Sunday Scaries are just sort of anticipatory anxiety, right? You're just kind of nervous about work starting tomorrow. And that is part of it, but it's way bigger than that. When they interviewed people who have this condition, shall we say, they found that there's actually a number of complex factors that play into the Sunday Scaries. One of the biggest contributors, no surprise, is burnout at work. Now, we're not really going to talk about this today, but this is a huge issue. And if you are someone who suffers or think you may suffer from burnout, about a year or so ago, we did a full message on this in a series called Blessed and Stressed. So head to the website, give that a listen if you think that might be beneficial. Another issue that contributes to the Sunday Scaries, and this is a big one, is feeling unprepared for the week ahead. Okay, this one is huge in my opinion. Like, forget about the fact that you got all these emails that are waiting for you when you get there, okay? Forget about the fact that you got a project that is due Tuesday, like 9. You don't even have clothes ready for tomorrow, okay? You haven't done laundry, okay? You haven't had time to go food shopping, so you didn't have lunch for tomorrow, okay? So you feel stressed, you feel unprepared. Now, add fuel to the fire, another major contributor the researchers found is the worry we feel about the unfinished tasks from last week. 30% of people polled said they get anxiety when they think about all the things they didn't get done the week before. You know, all the stuff you told yourself, I got to do, but you didn't do, and now you're kicking yourself. Okay? So here's another one. Struggling to balance work and home life. 40% of the people polled said that their Sunday Scaries stem from their inability to really just navigate and balance their jobs and their family life. And the list just goes on and on and on and on. But here's what I noticed. When you look at all the various factors that contribute to the Sunday Scaries, you look at burnout, feeling unprepared, worrying about the things that you haven't, done in the prior week, struggling to maintain this balance between work and home. Okay, you take all those various factors, you distill them down. The fundamental problem I believe that we are all dealing with is that we are all overbooked. That's it. Plain and simple. We are overbooked. Our schedules are jam-packed. You got job responsibilities, you got marriage responsibilities, you got parental responsibilities, you got to find time to have some semblance of a social life, okay? You got to find time to take care of yourself and exercise. You got chores you got to do. You got to decide what's for dinner every single day. And it is absolutely exhausting. And when 4 p.m. rolls around on a Sunday, you think, oh my gosh, I got to do it all over again. And I haven't even recovered from the prior week. Sound like your life, right? You ever find yourself just saying, there just aren't enough hours in the day. And when you look at all the things you have to do, and that word have is important, and we're going to talk about that. When you look at all the things you have to do and the time in which you have to do them, there just aren't enough hours in the day. And what happens is that this constant thought begins to circulate in your mind, and you just wonder, you go, I wish I had more time. I wish I had more time. I wish I had more time to spend with my children. I wish I had more time to spend with my husband or my wife or the people that I love. I wish I had more time to take care of myself. I wish I had more time to volunteer, right? How about this one? I wish I had more time to spend with God. We're going to get into that next week. I wish I had more time to just invest into the important things in this life, but I'm so busy. So busy. When I talk to you guys on a Sunday, you show up and I go, hey, how was your week? Okay. The number one response I get, almost without fail, is good, just busy, right? Just busy. Busyness is an epidemic in this country. And the one thing that is uniquely American, okay, you're never going to see this in Italy, you're not going to see this in Spain, you're not going to see it really anywhere in Europe at all, is that Americans pride themselves on how busy they are. When Adam Duckworth and I, the guy who was just doing the announcements, when he and I used to work at the old church, Adam was famous for going around the office telling everybody how busy he was. Just like literally knocking on your door, letting you know, Mr. Important. Let me tell you who wasn't busy. Adam Duckworth, okay? Selling like Disney paraphernalia on eBay, okay? Now, ask him, okay? To this day, I love to bust his chops about it, as you can see, and he continues to insist, no, I'm really busy. So you can imagine the glee that I felt when an article came out in this last May that stated that stress bragging may make you seem less competent and less likable at work. I was quick to forward him that one. But somehow as Americans, we have been sold this bill of goods that we all need to be so busy. That busyness is a mark of a life well lived, right? Busyness is an indicator of success. But as we're going to see today, busyness often gets in the way of what's important. So let's get real for a second. Some of you are actually busy, okay? You got a lot of things on your plate. You have a lot of responsibilities. You wear a lot of hats. You are stretched thin, and you often find yourself thinking, I wish I had more time. What we're going to see today is that you have time for what you choose to have time for. That's it. Anytime we find ourselves saying, I wish I had more time for X, fill in the blank, whatever that might be. The problem is not time. The problem is you're actually choosing something over something else. In other words, the problem lies in what you prioritize. You only have 24 hours in a day, and you cannot do it all. You try to, but you can't. And that's why you're so stressed. That's why you feel this doom that you're going to feel in a couple of hours. Because you are now facing the consequences of your scheduling decisions. The chickens have come home to roost, my friends. And chances are, if you find yourself saying, I wish I had more time for my kids, I wish I had more time for my wife or my husband or my health or my God, then chances are your priorities are out of whack. So what I want to do today is I want to try to help us make a decision in our lives. Make a choice, because we have a choice. I want to help us choose between the important and the urgent. How can God empower us to choose that which is important over that which is urgent? Or to say it another way, how do we choose between what matters and what matters most? Because I'm going to argue that when it comes to those Sunday Scaries, when we think about all the things that we haven't accomplished in the last week, when we think about all the things that we have to do in the week ahead, we immediately think about the urgent things, not the important things. Now, chances are you hear me say this and you go, wait, hold on a second. John, I thought urgent things are important. I mean, they certainly feel important, don't they? And sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. There's a difference. Like if you're a business owner and you've got an upset customer, dealing with that upset customer is urgent. But creating systems to prevent customers from getting upset is important. If your car needs repair because you didn't change the oil, right? Fixing your car is urgent. But what's important? Regularly changing your oil, doing these things, maintenance, upkeep, right? What's the takeaway? If you choose what's important, you won't deal with many things that are urgent. But if you always find that you're focusing on the urgent, you will never have enough time. for the important. So we really want to strive to choose the important over the urgent. Now, to guide this conversation, I want to introduce you to two very famous sisters in the Bible, known as Mary and Martha. Let me give you a little bit of background information on these ladies. Mary and Martha were very close family friends of Jesus, and they had a brother whose name was Lazarus. Lazarus would go on to be very famous because he would die, and 4 days later, Jesus would bring him back to life. Right? That is this family that we're dealing with today. Now, in today's passage, Jesus and his disciples drop into Mary and Martha's house for a little bit of a visit. And what we're going to see is that Martha does what so many of us do. She chooses the urgent, and she misses out on the important. Let me show you how this plays out. We're reading Luke chapter 10, verses 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. All right, so right out of the gate, we see that Mary down here has chosen what's important. She has chosen to sit at the feet of Jesus and to learn from him. But Martha, it says, was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. In other words, Martha got distracted by the urgent. This urgent need presented itself. The alarm bells started to go off, and she goes, I got to do this. I got to get this done. And even though the Messiah, God himself, was sitting in her living room teaching, Martha is frantically running around the house going, I got to set the table. I got to make the right foods are out. I got to make the nice dishes. I got to make sure the tablecloth is flat. I got to make sure the toilet lids are down, okay? Martha is running around like a chicken with her head cut off. And says she came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? So you got two sisters, two very different choices. One has chosen to embrace this opportunity to sit at Jesus' feet and learn, and the other one is worried about Fabuloso and silverware. Now, is Martha wrong for wanting a clean home for her guests? Absolutely not, right? I mean, it's Jesus, right? Imagine he came to your house. Is Martha wrong for wanting to put out a nice presentation for Jesus and his disciples? Absolutely not. Listen, all of those things matter. They all matter. But here's where her sort of problem starts. Look at how Luke describes this. He says, Martha was distracted by all the preparations, here it is, that had to be made. Had to be made. This has got to get done. This has got the urgency. Sound like you? I got to do this. I got to do that. We're frenzied. And we wonder why we are mental disasters come Sunday night. Martha, who was well-meaning, was distracted by the urgent, by all the preparations that just had to get made. She allowed the things that matter to distract her and to pull her away from the things that matter most. And I just wonder, how many of us have been distracted from what matters most? I mean, how many of us in our pursuit of the urgent have neglected the important? Now, in Martha's case, Jesus was the important thing. And I just find it interesting that in our own lives, if we're being honest, our busyness causes us to neglect the very thing that Martha neglected. Jesus, right? Because we're too busy to pray, right? We're too busy to open up the Bible and read Scripture. We're too busy. We got too many good things going on to go to church. We're too busy. Next week, Jesus is going to make the argument that often the reason we feel so empty and so exhausted by the end of the week is because we've neglected our time with God. But maybe it's not spiritual for you. Maybe you're here today and you might say, I'm just so busy doing things for my kids that I haven't had time to enjoy my kids. Any moms out there feel like this? I would say dads, but come on, we know who's running the show. I got to get all the toys cleaned up. I got to get the lunches packed. I got to get their laundry done. I got to schlep them all around town to school and soccer and dance and play dates. Now, I'm not saying those things don't matter. They matter. But they often distract us from what matters most. Here's a hard one. Maybe you might say, I'm so busy doing things for my kids that I've neglected my marriage. Sometimes in our pursuit of being the best parent we can be, we actually make idols of our children. Our lives revolve around them. Meanwhile, you can't remember the last time you and your spouse went out for a date night. Psychologists will tell you, and I believe the Bible would back this up, the foundation of a healthy family is a healthy marriage. Maybe you might just say, I'm just so busy being pulled in a million directions that I've neglected ... fill in the blank. My mental health, my physical health, my spiritual health. I'm so busy chasing after the urgent that I've neglected. I have no time for the important, for what matters most. Now watch how Jesus responds to Martha. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things. For some of you here today, if you had a life verse, this would be it. This right here sums up your life. You're freaked out all the time. Your hair is always on fire. There's always an emergency. You got to get it all done. You act as though you're responsible for keeping the entire world going. You tell yourself, if I don't, it won't. You are worried and upset over many things, Jesus would say. But few things are needed, or indeed only one. Jesus' little reality check here really opened my eyes up to something. It really made me reevaluate how I prioritize, or the way that I think about the things that I prioritize. Think about this. Martha is doing something that she truly believes is important. In other words, in Martha's mind, this flurry of activity that she's got going around in this house is a worthwhile pursuit. But Jesus says, it's not. It matters, but it's not what matters most. Not right now, at least. And it just makes me wonder, what am I pursuing in my own life, where I am telling myself, this has got to get done? Like, this is so important. Like I am convinced this is the most important thing that I need to devote my time to right here and now. But if I were to stop and consult Jesus, he might say, John, you're upset and worried, but it's not important. And it's not what matters most. Let's read Martha's reaction again. She comes to Jesus, goes, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Look at this. Tell her to come and help me. Okay, she's so convinced that what she's chosen to do is important that she's mad at her sister for not helping. And for that matter, she actually thinks her sister's priorities are out of whack. Jesus, tell her to stop. Tell her to come help me. Watch what Jesus says. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Mary has chosen the important. Martha has surrendered to the urgent. And I'm just telling you, if you are not vigilant in your life, with your schedule, the urgent will always crowd out the important. And I think the reason that so many of us get Sunday Scaries is because we have fallen victim to this. Constantly find ourselves going, I wish I had more time. I wish I had more time. There's not, okay. You have a choice. You really do. We have a time for what we choose to have time for. How do we do that? How do we choose between what matters and what matters most? I got a couple of thoughts for you, okay? Some super practical tips. Now, these are not highly spiritual, but they will help you accomplish what Scripture is calling us to do, which is focus on the important, on what matters most. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to learn how to create artificial deadlines. Here's why this is so important. There is a principle that exists known as the Parkinson's Law. Parkinson's Law states that a task will expand to fill the time allotted for its completion. In other words, if you know you got a week to do something, you're going to take a week to do it. And because you have so much time, you are going to inevitably overcomplicate it for yourself. This is where an artificial deadline becomes useful. Let me give you an example from my own life. My sermons, okay, these messages you're listening to right now, okay, they're technically not due until Saturday night, so they get them loaded into the computer here, okay? But I've created an artificial deadline of Thursday morning. In fact, I've given it a name. I've told you this name before. I call them Turn Out Thursdays, okay? Now, it's very different than what you do at the bar. Anyway, so this was a game changer for me and my family because it used to take me all week to prepare these messages. Why? Because I had all week. So not only would I be working Monday through Friday on these messages, but soon I found myself spending Saturdays as well. Now here's where it got confusing for me. Here's where it got complicated for me. See, because for me, the sermon is important. And the sermon matters. I mean, without the sermon, we got a problem here. Okay? So furthermore, the sermon really is pretty much the biggest part of my job. But here's the problem. The sermon, which is important, was causing me to neglect other things that were important, and sometimes neglect things that were more important, like being a husband to my wife, like being a father to my child. See, the truth is, anybody could do my job. Anybody could do your job. But nobody else could be a husband to my wife or a father to my child. My priorities were out of whack. So the sermon matters, yeah, but my family matters more. And so this artificial deadline freed me up to do other important things. It allowed me to devote Fridays to taking care of my child. I call those Father Fridays. Saturdays to spending time with my family, right? So we want to create artificial deadlines. Next thing we want to do is we got to figure out how to put a hard stop to your day. Because of technology and email and cell phones, because so many of us now work from home since COVID, it is very easy and very tempting to just go, I'm just going to work until I'm finished, right? I'm just going to work until I'm finished. Guess what? You're never finished. There's always another email. There's always something else you could do or have to do. And what happens? Well, you're sitting at the dinner table, and now you're distracted by emails. You're playing on the floor with your kids. Phone keeps lighting up. You pick it up, right? You get distracted. All of a sudden, your child's going, Daddy, Mommy, and you miss these moments. Adding artificial deadlines, hard stops to your day, frees up time so you can put your energy into the places you value most. Lastly, we got to learn how to say no. I love to say no. Live to say no. It's like my favorite thing. I really should start saying yes more often. But anyway, here's what we got to learn to say no. We're all going to have all kinds of opportunities to do things during our week, okay? There are many things and people and tasks and errands, hey, don't miss this, fun things that are vying for our attention, that are competing for our very limited time, but we simply can't do everything. And based on what I'm seeing in my life, based on what I'm seeing in the research this week, is that many people are being robbed of a meaningful life because they are overcommitted. You're doing way too much, and you know it. You're always running late. You're constantly double booking yourselves. You can't even get a breath, and your mental health and your personal life and your spiritual life and your home life are paying the price, which is why we need to learn to put up some boundaries in our lives. We got to have the courage, we got to have the faith to say no to the good things so that we can say yes to the best things. We got to learn to say no in order to protect the valuable time that God has given us. James, who is the brother of Jesus, gives us a reality check about the time that we actually do have. Here's what he says. How do you know what's going to happen tomorrow? For the length of your lives is as uncertain as the morning fog. Now you see it, soon it's gone. So, in light of the fact, as James would say, that we are here today and gone tomorrow, in light of the fact that life is precious and short and that every day is a gift from God, parents in the room, in light of the fact that we only have 936 weeks with our children living under our roofs, we got to learn to say no to what matters so we can say yes to what matters most. Jesus said, Martha, Martha, right? What you're doing matters. Preparing dinners matters. Cleaning the house matters. But Mary has chosen what matters most. We got to learn to say no. We got to learn how to be ruthlessly selective with our yeses, because the more that we say yes, the more that we put on our plate, the more that we add to our schedule, the busier we become. And busyness often crowds out that which is important. So what's practical? What do you do with a message like this? If it's your first time here at Downtown Harbor Church, every single week we put this word on the screen because we want to make sure you can leave on a Sunday and know exactly what to do with what you've heard. So, what do we see today? We saw that Martha was distracted by household chores. She got distracted and pulled away by the urgent and it prevented her from pursuing a relationship with Jesus, that which was important. So with that in mind, I would ask you this. What's the most important thing you've been too distracted to pursue? Maybe you see yourself in Martha, right? Maybe you'd go, honestly, I've let everything get in the way of my relationship with God. I mean, I'm too distracted by work. I'm too distracted by pleasure. I'm too distracted by errands. There's just always something that gets in the way. Maybe you might say, I have neglected investing into my children. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe it's your health, right? What is the one thing in your life where you would say, yeah, I really need to focus on that, but I still don't have time. I think God is giving us an opportunity to reprioritize our life. Okay, enough with the buts. What do you need to stop doing so that you can start doing what's important? Because you can't do it all. And the more you do, the less you do well. You know this. I'm not telling you something you don't already know. I believe your Sunday Scaries are telling you that something's got to give. Something's got to go. Jesus is inviting us to simplify our lives. Only a few things are needed, he said, or indeed only one. It is time to stop doing more, and it's time to start doing more of what matters most. Let me pray for you.